Welcome back to this morning's Political Brew. I'm Don Kerrigan, in for Pat Callahan with Phil Harriman and John Richardson.
Good morning.
A lot happening in Maine, as always. The Public Utilities Commission came down unanimously in favor of that controversial CMP transmission line in western Maine. Any surprises with that, as far as you think?
I don't think so. Their job is to help make sure that the public utilities are, sufficient to meet the needs, and I think they fulfilled that portion. What's going to be interesting is what is the Department of Environmental Protection and the Land Use Regulatory Commission and even the legislature. What are they going to do?
Well, that's the other part of this, because there are a number of people in the legislature who want to get the legislature to jump into the middle of this and stop the regulatory process for as much as 2 years.
Well, what they're really trying to do, those who are opposed, I mean, we're in a race. Maine will either have this transmission line or New Hampshire, and if we don't reach certain milestones and through time to get this thing completed, then Massachusetts will turn to New Hampshire, and New Hampshire will have that transmission line. So those who are opposed are actually looking to stall this project. I don't think they have the science to really kill it, but I think what they know is they have supporters in the legislature who might slow it down enough to effectively kill it and end up giving it back to New Hampshire.
Do you think the legislature has the will and desire to do that?
I think some. I think if I were CMP, I'd be very concerned. And I've said before, I think 72% of the people are opposed. This is probably a good idea for the state of Maine in terms of what we need long-term for infrastructure and support for energy. But is it a good deal right now with what's been provided financially?
And what about this whole issue, Phil, I'll ask you, of the state agencies and the governor, in fact, appearing to take a stand that's against the will of the majority of people, based on an advocacy group's poll, I will say. But
well, there's always a reason to be suspect where that information comes from, but they are swimming upstream from the at least perceived public emotion. And to John's point a moment ago, why don't we let it go to New Hampshire? There doesn't appear to be these overwhelming long-term sustainable benefits to we the people in the state of Maine, so maybe it should go to New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm. But we'll hear from CMP about that, won't we?
I'll give him Phil's cell phone.
There you go. This vaccine issue, which has been so hot in the legislature and socially over the last couple of months, to reduce the number of exemptions parents can get for not having kids vaccinated. Legislative committee voted along party lines to approve the vaccine bill. Is this now a Republican-Democrat issue, John?
It shouldn't be. It should be a public health issue, and we should follow the science. I mean, a lot of these folks who are working and against vaccines are actually relying on false science, and it's unfortunate. And I know it's an emotional issue, but we really need to go back and look at the science to make these decisions. It shouldn't be a Republican or Democratic issue. It should be a health issue.
In a rare moment of bipartisanship, I think John has stated it exactly right. You only have to look to New York City, where Mayor Blasio, in a borough in New York City, has basically said, we've got, my words, an epidemic of measles outbreak and people need to get vaccinated. So if you're against vaccinations, then you also need to accept the responsibility that if it's your children, then they're not going to be in the public school system, because we can't afford to jeopardize
and we
public
recently
health.
Had a young child die here this last week.
Influenza.
About influenza, right? And could have had certain vaccines to, whether that would have made a difference or not, I don't know. But I can tell you, it's sad. It's a sad moment.
On the other end of the life spectrum, we have now the legislature is going to once again take up this issue of physician-assisted suicide. They call it death with dignity. There's a petition drive that has gathered enough signatures to put it on the ballot. They're holding off on that, waiting to see if the legislature will pass it. They did last time. The governor, LePage, vetoed it. Is Maine ready to go this way? What do we think?
Could be. Oregon went this way, and some other states have done so, and they led the way, and that was kind of what they used as the blueprint when they brought this legislation to Maine. I think it's worth the conversation. I think it's worth going to the referendum on the issue. I think it's worth having a legislative discussion about it.
Phil, what do you think?
This has been going on for quite some time. In fact, when John served in the legislature in the last century, it was one of those pieces of legislation that we're having. This is the same conversation, and I don't know what has changed in society here in Maine that says, okay, we're now going to create a process where someone who's ready to give up or someone has decided they're suffering, that we should end someone else's life. I don't know
More of us are getting older. Maybe that's what's changed.
Yeah, but this is, we're trying to have through the legislature decide a personal human dignity
All right,
issue.
I've got one question that we're looking for a very brief answer from both of you, then winners and losers. This question is surprise. So Governor Mills and her administration is marking her 100 days in office. What grade would you give her, Phil?
I give her a B+.
John?
B+. I would give her a B+ as well.
Look at that. Wow. Unbelievable. Winners and losers. John?
I think the loser has to be President Trump, who tries to continually divide and conquer us by trying to bring in young kids, parents into these sanctuary cities with no financial support. I think the winner of the week are the prosecutors who actually went to bat against these very well-to-do parents who try to get their kids into school, and now many of them are trying to avoid any kind of prosecution or jail time, and the prosecutors have just upped the ante. Good for them. I'm proud of them, and they are my winner.
All right.
Loser of the week, if the Attorney General Barr is right that there was spying going on the Trump campaign, whoever's behind this is the loser of the week, in my opinion. The winner of the week is the head of the Department of Health and Human Services in Maine. She has taken on the analysis of why child deaths over the last 5 years have been due to sleeping incidences, and to children who have been abused tends to be as a result of living in homes where there's drug addiction, and she's going after both of those issues. Good for her.
All right. Thank you both very much, Phil and John. News Center continues right after this.